Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming. Welcome to the new film by Edward Norton, Motherless Brooklyn. My name is Cameron Bailey. I'm the artistic director and the co-head here at TIFF. I'm so glad to see all of you out here tonight. This is the international premiere of this film, and we are thrilled to be presenting it to you. To begin, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge where we are. This is the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat First Nations. The land that we're on right now has been occupied for 15,000 years by human beings, and we are grateful to be a part of this community and to be sharing this land. We're very glad to be in this wonderful theater as well. We thank Visa Canada for supporting the Visa Screening Room here at the Princess of Wales Theatre. And we want to remind you that our most important prize is the Grolsch People's Choice Award. That's the award that you vote for. We really want you to vote, so please go online to tiff.net/vote and vote for your favorite films. And big thanks to Warner Brothers Pictures for providing us with this film. We're always glad to be bringing back new films from Warner Brothers. They've been great partners of ours for many years. You know Edward Norton. He's an Academy Award-nominated actor who's appeared in such films as Primal Fear, American History X, Fight Club, The Incredible Hulk, Moonrise Kingdom, and Birdman. He's also a director. He made his directorial debut with Keeping the Faith, and this is his latest film. It's based on the novel by Jonathan Lethem, and it is a masterful drama. What I loved about the film is that it starts as a character story, and that continues all the way through, but as you're getting to know the lead character, which he plays, and the other characters in the film more and more, it also opens up and becomes almost an origin story of contemporary New York. It's really a portrait of a city as well. Beautifully done. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did when I first saw it. I'm very glad that Edward's come to introduce the film to you this evening. Please join me in welcoming the director, Edward Norton.
Thank you. I really want to compliment you on the spirit of this festival and thank you and the volunteers and the staff that make this possible. It's a real gift to your community, but it's a real privilege that you give the filmmakers that you invite here, and we greatly appreciate it. I have to say, for those of you who don't know, Toronto is second home for me. I spent my youth near a little town called Mbatha-Raw, Ontario, up west of Algonquin Provincial Park. My wife is a Markham girl. Camp Tamaqua, Algonquin Park. And there is a very strong contingent of the Robertson Siskins here tonight representing. We love Toronto. I love Toronto. I've made a lot of films here, and we've spent a lot of our lives here, and it's really, really fun to bring a film here. So the film you're going to see tonight is the story of an underdog. It's about an underdog who has to learn that heroism is not about having superpowers, but about rising through your own daily struggles and finding the strength to care about other people and care for each other as the real meaning of heroism. And there's too many people to thank when you get to make a film, but what I want to say is that for me, making this film was very much an underdog experience. It was a struggle. And when you go to people as a director and you say, I want to make a big movie, a big epic movie about New York in the 50s, and it's about a detective with Tourette syndrome and obsessive compulsive disorder, a lot of people look at their shoes very quickly and uncomfortably and find a way to go to the door. And the people who don't, the people who rally around you, become your heroes, the people who have supported you. And I have to thank a few of them. Warner Brothers Sue Kroll and Blair Rich and the whole team there, and especially my dear friend Toby Emmerich, who, if an executive of a major studio has ever supported a filmmaker in a stalwart and relentless fashion to help him bring a unique and original vision to the screen, Toby Emmerich made this film happen for me, and I thank you, Toby. It's a dream to have finally made this film together. As a director, when you say crazy things like let's do the 50s in New York and rebuild Penn Station and stuff like that, it's a kind of madness, but there are people who bring their talents to making that happen. And I had a Justice League of producers on this film named Rachel Shane, Gigi Pritzker, Toronto's own Michael Biederman, and Bill Migliore. Those are the people who, along with a great cast and crew, who make me look like I know what I'm doing. And in particular, to make this kind of a film, you have to get an incredible cast of actors, and I got truly one of the greatest casts that's ever been assembled. People who worked for no money at all for scale, who came because they believed in this vision, and a few of them are here tonight, and I want to introduce them. First, I want to introduce dear, good New York theater actor friends of mine, great actors, Josh Pais and Fisher Stevens. My only non-New York theater actor in this film is a luminous talent who, if you don't already know her work, you're going to soon, Gugu and Mbatha-Raw. And finally, when I moved to New York to become an actor in the theater, my generation of actors, all of us, Mark Ruffalo, Phil Hoffman, a lot of us who were coming up at that time, one of the pole stars for us was an actor named Willem Dafoe, who he built a New York theater company downtown. He became a movie star. He became an Academy Award nominated actor, and he was the kind of actor we all wanted to be. And getting to direct him in this film was one of the privileges of my career. So please welcome Willem Dafoe. This is all great fun as a director. As an actor, speaking to you right before the film starts is a nightmare. So now I'm going to ask you for something very unusual, which is please close your eyes, wipe the hard drive of your mind, forget my face, my voice, everything about me, and get lost in the movie. Have a great time. Thanks.
Edward, congratulations on this film. It's got a kind of a classical noir feel to it in some ways, but I know that you were starting from an original novel and you really did recreate it in according to the vision that you wanted in terms of when it was set and just the tone of it as well. Can you talk a little bit about what kind of feel you wanted to achieve with this film?
Yeah, I mean, I always think it's important for people to take out of a film what they want to take out of it, but I do think that I think there's a great tradition in American cinema of we sometimes call it noir, but I think the idea of peeling back the sunny narrative of what our national character is and looking at the shadow narrative that's underneath. Look at the narrative that challenges who we're out there saying we are versus the way that we're acting. And I think there's been these films have tended to come up in times when maybe we've had doubts about whether we're straying from the ideal that we market ourselves under. And I think Jonathan created this character who I loved because as an underdog, he immediately engenders your empathy. And nobody's looking at him, just like nobody's looking at Laura and nobody's looking at Paul. And I think I loved the idea of invisible people who are exposing the things that are going on. And I felt that Jonathan's character opened up this opportunity to look at some of the dark realities of what's shaped the city and the country that we're living in now.
Can you talk a little bit about your character? When we first see him, he looks like he's going to be, the henchman, the guy who's the kind of the lower player in the criminal gang, but he's so much more than that. And as the film proceeds, we really begin to see more and more of him. And as you say, he really evolves into the hero of the story, but he's an unlikely hero. In terms of playing that role and also directing your own performance, what are the gradations of that as you let the audience see more and more of who this guy is?
Yeah, I think Joseph. I think Joseph Campbell used to talk about the hero's journey, and I think the hero's journey is always one of growth and evolution. And I think he can't really see beyond his own, as Laura says, daily battles. He's enmeshed within his understandable and very sympathetic struggles. But I think that, there are superheroes who can fly in and save us, or there are sort of the ways that we can rise up out of our own problems and transcend and grow into being a more heroic version of ourselves. And I think what I liked about Lionel was the idea that he could exist within the limitations and gifts of his own condition and still become a person who can act against the larger forces of the world.
Willem and Gugu, you're playing characters in a particular world in the frame of what the story requires, but also in a particular moment in New York's history as well. In terms of both what New York would have been like in the 1950s, but also just the world of movies from the 1950s, how did you craft your performance? Were there a certain kind of calibration that you needed to get to in order to get the tone of that world?
Well, for me, what was really refreshing about Laura, so often when you see women in 1950s movies, you think of the sort of 50s housewife, and I think Laura is, so much more pioneering than that. She grew up in the Harlem jazz clubs, but she also is a trained lawyer. She's straddling these two different worlds, and as Edward said, she's sort of very much underestimated, and I found that really fascinating. And the period, and Edward's script was just so rich and layered. Every character as it emerges, everybody has their entrance, and then there's just more and more layers to each person as you meet them, and I really appreciated that, and I love the noir genre as well. So it was a really great challenge, and to work with these incredible actors.
And Willem?
Craft the performance. I just thought about playing the scenes. My character has a responsibility, and he's got all this secret information to impart to him to push the story along. And that text is very rich, and it's very complicated. So the thing that I was always concerned with was being clear about it, conveying it, but also doing the action required to push things along. I like the character very much because who he is initially, who you think he is very different than what is presented later and what his relationship is to these other parts of the story. So to craft a performance, that's tough to say. I just had to, deliver a kind of urgency and a kind of stake, and I really cued off Edward's character, take what he could receive, sort of, and give it to him.
I thought of Willem as the Obi-Wan Kenobi of mid-century New York urban policy. He's the Jedi Knight in rags who, and if there's anybody who I felt could sort of seem a little crazy, but then actually be a really good person, it was Willem.
What is he trying to say, Willem?
Sounds okay to me.
What was it like on set? You've got this incredible cast of characters. You're acting and directing at the same time. How does that even work where you've got these incredible performers, you've got Alec Baldwin there on many days as well, and you're also kind of running, I would imagine, back and forth between directing and being in the scene?
I'm getting anxious again just listening to you describe it back to me. It's like just the memory of it is turning me into a pretzel again. It's let me put it this way, whatever drove me to feel that it was something I wanted to do, I felt very anxious about what it would do to my fellow actors and their experience, because we like to have concentration together. We like to, even within all the artifice of making films, I think one of the things actors often do for each other as the last resort, because is create a bubble together within all this artifice, all this technical stuff that's going on that makes up the day. Actors help each other to create an illusion together. And when one of you is breaking out of that with a constancy, it's a lot to ask. And I think my hedge against it was really to go to seek out the actors that, to me, I knew were tradecraft professionals. And by that I mean really like theater trained people that I knew didn't have what I would call an emotional neediness from a director. Could bring more to me than I could ever really like guide them into. And my cast in this really was my secret weapon in terms of being able to achieve the sort of schizophrenic experience of being both in and outside the playing of it.
And for you, Gugu and Willem, what was it like working with him as both actor and director? Was that complicated? You can leave the stage or close your ears right now.
You know, it was amazing. I mean, you know, sometimes I would just be in complete awe of all of the plates that Edward had to spin, all of the different hats he was wearing, from, you know, maybe adjusting the script slightly or to being in the scene, to watching something on the monitor, to driving a car, to, you know, the reams of dialogue that we had. And it was so incredibly impressive. But it was also, it made for quite an intimate process, you know, because your director's right there, you know, so it's very quick to receive the notes, to make adjustments, to, you know, and it's like you're all in it together. I don't know, it just felt very intimate way to work.
Intimate and fluid, and also sometimes I got the feeling he was everywhere. So he had, no, really, it was crazy. He had so many tasks that I think that created no room for, you know, self-consciousness or overthinking. He was very well prepared because he'd been living with this material for a long time. He really felt the character so deeply, he didn't really have to think about that. So it's almost like he's there as the God, you know, creating the world, and he's in it. So there's no stepping out and kind of evaluating. There was a fluidity, as I say, an urgency that was very cool. And it never, you know, it was like never, there wasn't that delay of, ooh, how did we do? Let's get feedback from the director, or, ooh, let's check playback. It was very direct. It was much closer to some sort of theater experience. You hop on that train, you hang onto your hat, and, you know, it's like you feel everything. And it felt a little bit like that. It was quite seamless.
And just watching you do that reminded me of what you said the other day about it like being in a boxing ring, you know, and you've got your boxing coach like whispering notes in your ear, and they're in the ring with you, you know, and I thought that was a really good way to describe it.
Or if we're going to go crazy with sports analogies, I thought, you know, it's the difference between, you know, plays being called in from the sidelines, from the coach into the quarterback's ear, or the quarterback assessing the field and, you know, calling the plays himself. I don't know how I feel about sports analogies, but
That works.
But in New York, when you're on the streets in New York and someone's running around shouting strange things and talking to themselves, nobody even glances at you. It's like it doesn't cause a stir in the slightest. So we moved pretty low profile.
I wanted to ask you about that part of the performance as well, the Tourette syndrome and the compulsive behavior as well, which requires a certain really disciplined physicality to that part of the performance. How did you develop that? What kind of research did you do to create that part of the role?
There's lots of good documentation of there are good documentaries about people with Tourette syndrome. There's some very warm and deep feeling ones. There's Oliver Sacks's great writing on it, and I had met people organically in the course of my life, and then specifically sought out some. The thing that I think is fascinating and beautiful in many ways about Tourette syndrome is that it's a wildly creative condition. As you can see, it expresses itself in people in a very individualistic way. Nobody manifests it in exactly the same way, and the expressions and fixations physically and vocally, the wordplay, the degrees of severity is extremely individualistic, and so there was a lot of liberation for creativity within it, and that made me. Of course, you feel a pretty profound obligation to be truthful within it, and yet it wasn't the kind of thing that you have an anxiety about getting wrong because you've selected, you know, an incorrect manifestation. Because it really to say that there's a spectrum is an understatement.
Mm-hmm. I love the word "if." That was that kind of recurring gesture that he had. Anything you want to tell us about that? Was there a meaning to that?
I think there's it. Willem's character says it. You know, if is a wonderful existential question, and I'd leave it at that. I thought it stood in for a lot of things. Candidly, that was something that when I was in college, there was a taxi driver I used to get really regularly. It's not in the book, that particular, the tic of that word isn't in the book. But I had a taxi driver that I used to ride with a lot, going to and from the college train station, and he had Tourette syndrome, and that was his word. It took me dozens of rides to realize what was going on, but it always stuck with me. It made me smile, and it stayed in my brain when we got into this. Yeah,
that's great. You mentioned earlier something about this film speaking to today, not just being about the 1950s, but about maybe today and certain gaps between ideals and the reality, perhaps, of whether it's New York or America generally. Was there some element of contemporary commentary that you wanted to include in the film?
I think people can. I don't think it's hard to. I think it's hard to feel the resonance. I think in American society, I think Canadian, in all of our societies, in all of our, you know, if we, in these societies that we hope are moving continually toward a more and more progressive humanist ideal of how we're living, we obviously contend with a sustained attraction to the more brutal expressions of power. And what the allure of those is, and how much of it we're willing to tolerate before, as Lionel says, we get off the fence and do something about it, no matter what our own daily struggles are, is, I think, a good question to be asking right now.
And Alec Baldwin really is a perfect actor to play that kind of unbridled exercise of power character.
Alec, his brave and very, I'm going to say, contributive role in using farce and satire to stick forks in targets that deserve forks being stuck in them. Shouldn't be. I don't actually. I'm not glib about that. I think he's been in a very concerted way addressing it from a satirical side. I think it was anyone who knows Alec, who's seen Alec in the theater, seen him as a dramatic actor, knows that his talent with language. He has a Shakespearean actor's gift for language and the paradoxes of seduction and brutality that is marvelous. When he was reading the script, he wrote me. He said, "I feel my inner Lee J. Cobb coming out." For those of you film fans, like Lee J. Cobb in Death of a Salesman and On the Waterfront was one of the great bullies of American cinema, and I think Alec has an old world heft and gravitas to him that I think is hard to find.
It's fantastic. It was such a pleasure to watch this remarkable cast with that script and under your direction as well. It really felt like this is, when people say they don't make movies like this anymore, you're making a movie like this. So thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. Thanks.
Willem Dafoe, Gugu Mbatha-Raw, and Edward Norton. Thank you.